this silly balloon. Right then. There we go. If there's anybody wanting hello. So anybody there who wants some GCSE history revision needs to let me know that you're there, and then I'll do some revision. So give us a clue. I'll give people a couple of minutes to let me know that they're doing GCSE history, and then there's a point in me actually going through some of this stuff. Otherwise, it's alright. I've got plenty of other things to get with. I'll go and do that. Kieran's here. That makes it worth my while. Thanks, Kieran. Emily's there. Fantastic. Double worth my while. Brilliant. Right then. First of all, is there any requests of anything specific you want me to go through? Now, Brody, that's year 10 revision. So the year 11s are doing their exams in 2 weeks. 2 weeks tomorrow they'll be doing the first history exam. So I'm going through year 11 stuff. But I will do some stuff for you next year, exactly like this. So Kieran, Emily, anybody else, if you've got any requests, then I'll go through something specific. Otherwise, I'm going to start with the reasons for the crash in the US economy. Megan. Hello, Megan. Right then, I'm going to try and keep this down to half an hour, because I guess you're probably all revising for your English, which is tomorrow. So I'll give you a sharp burst of history, and you can go back to whatever it was you were doing before. So I'm going to look at reasons for the crash today. There's all sorts of questions that you can see on the website that go through reasons for the crash. I can go through the fireside chats as well, Kieran. Don't you worry about that. I'm definitely going through it. It's in my next section, which is why Roosevelt won in 1932. So it'll come across in that somehow. The economy, it's a strange thing. And we've looked at the reasons why it boomed. We did that last week, and you've probably done it. You will have done it in class. And actually, some of the reasons why the economy boomed can also be reasons why it crashed in 1929. The first one that I'm going to talk to you that is on that theme is irresponsible lending. So we talked about how hire purchase and hire purchase in particular meant that people could afford to buy things that otherwise they didn't have the money to buy. And that helped to cause the boom. Well, the problem was there was too much lending going on. So people ended up borrowing beyond their means. And then there came a point where they couldn't pay it back. And so there was a lot of debt in America towards the end of the 1920s, with people owning products but not able to always pay it back, especially when the Wall Street crash happened and people started to lose their jobs, because it had a knock-on effect. Let's say one factory goes bust in a town, and all the people there lose their jobs, and loads of them have got like fridges on hire purchase, cars on hire purchase, and so on. And they suddenly can't pay it off, so they have to give the product back, or something gets seized, or whatever. The companies that have sold them the fridges, the cars, they're going to lose out on money because they've put the money into producing the product, so they're not getting it back, and it sort of has a multiplying effect. So you don't need to write all of that in an exam. What you need to be aware of is the lending went too far. There was irresponsible lending. There was a lot of people in debt in America by the end of the 1920s. Now, one that's maybe a little bit easier to go through is buying on the margin. How? Well, buying on the margin, obviously, was where, if you should be aware, people like to buy shares. And the more shares that you can buy when the shares hopefully go up, the greater your profit. So people were borrowing money from the banks specifically to invest in the stock market. Share price goes up, you pay your money back to the bank with interest, so the bank wins, and then you get to keep all the rest of the profit that you got from investing in the stock prices. When the stock market went, there were so many people who had borrowed a load of money from the banks, and then the stock price had gone down. So their stocks were not worthless, but they certainly weren't worth as much as they paid for them. They couldn't pay the banks back their money. This is one big reason why so many banks went bust. I can't remember the statistic. I think it's probably on the internet. This is a good tip for you, actually, in the exam. I think that it's something like 300 banks went bust by 1930, something like that. But I don't know. So here's my trick. If I'm sat in the exam and I can't remember a specific stat, I'm going to say hundreds of banks went bankrupt. I expect it's 300, but I'm not putting that because I might be wrong. Hundreds of banks went bankrupt, and I'm not sure if it's by 1930, but I'm pretty sure it's by 1932. So I can say hundreds of banks went bankrupt by 1932 when Roosevelt won the election. See? That impresses the examiner because I'm not wrong. I can't be wrong. I don't know the specific statistic, which would be better, but I'm getting around it. So there we go. This kind of made the crash even worse because people who just didn't do any of this, didn't have anything to buy, didn't have anything buying on the margin. These banks went bust because they'd lent all this money out. People couldn't pay it back. And then if you've got all your savings in a bank and you had nothing to do with those two things, the bank goes bankrupt, you lose all your savings as well. And so there's loads of people losing loads of money. They can't put that money into the economy, so it has a knock-on impact on businesses. So irresponsible lending, especially buying on the margin, that helped to cause the crash. What else have we got in there? Oh, right. Now, for a second there, when I looked at my screen, I thought I'd put in brackets there turnips, but I didn't. It's tariffs, which is yet another example why the economy boomed, but also why it crashed. If something is saturated, you might have done it in biology with cells, it's full. And this is the problem in America by the end of the 20s. At the start of the 20s, relatively few people, for example, owned a car. But of course, as the 20s go on, the economy is doing better, lots of people own a car. So that means by the end of the 20s, the only people buying cars are the people who want the latest models, which is less than if everybody didn't have a car in the first place. Similar thing with electricity and radios. You needed to be connected to electricity, obviously, to run a radio. Well, not obviously, I suppose. They didn't have batteries then. They had to plug it in. So there was a lot of people at the start of the 20s who couldn't buy a radio, even if they wanted to, because their area of the country might not have been connected to electricity yet. Over the 20s, more and more places got connected to electricity. So electricity is one reason the economy boomed. So that meant they could buy these radios, fridges, whatever it is. By the end of the 1920s, everybody who wanted a radio pretty much would have bought one. So again, the only people buying them are the people who want the latest model. Because by the end of the 20s, almost all of America was connected to electricity. So that meant the market was saturated. So over the decade, they might have been churning out loads of these things, loads of radios, loads of fridges, loads of vacuums, loads of cars, and they were always managing to sell because the next place might not have, certainly with electrical goods, might not have been connected to the electrical grid. So as the 20s go on and more places get connected, they can still keep selling all this stuff to all these people, but at the end, there's not so many people to sell to anymore. So they have to lay off some workers, close one of their extra bits of the factory, or I don't know, they're not going to expand. So the market being saturated, that's what I mean, meant there were less people to sell to, so the companies had to scale back. And of course you get a cycle of depression, because companies not selling enough, company scales back, people lose their jobs, so they can't buy as much stuff, so then other companies have a knock on that they don't sell as much, and they end up laying off staff, and the staff they lay off can't spend as much money, and so on you get the idea. So there's another one. And finally, is that finally? Yes, it is. Finally, another big reason for the crash. Oh, actually, I'll just go back one. Something that I should have mentioned is actually by 1929, there was unemployment was rising. This is one of the reasons. So I don't know the exact statistics. It might be on my sheets on the website. But yeah, unemployment was definitely on the rise by the end of the 1920s for this reason. And speculation, linking to buying on the margin, I've said how that was so bad. This is one of the big reasons why so many banks went bankrupt after the Wall Street crash. People were borrowing money to buy shares, and the share prices were going up through the 20s so they could pay off their loan, the bank got some interest, they got the profit, everyone's a winner. But when the crash happened, suddenly the banks weren't able to get the money back. The people couldn't pay the banks back, so they were going bust. The banks were going bust. Anybody with money in the bank, even if they were engaged in this or not, they were losing everything, and it was a horrific situation. Well, speculation, and the word pretty much means risking money on the stock market. Gambling, really. And so many people were doing it. Over the 20s, people began to, and I'd write this in the exam, people began to forget that the stock market could go down. Okay, the stock market didn't just go like that all the way through the 20s. It went down sometimes, but it'd always go back up. So the general trend was positive and share prices increasing. And people began to think that it was a sure bet, that the best way to make money, that you can't lose, which of course was categorically wrong. But more and more people were jumping on the bandwagon, speculating, and even buying on the margin. They're separate things, by the way. You could speculate on the stock market with just your own money. Buying on the margin, of course, is with the bank's money. So yeah, there's all these people. So when the crash happens, lots of people lose lots of money. And there we go. Reasons for the crash. So are there any other reasons for the crash, or any other bits that are on my sheets? Anything that you want me to go through surrounding why there was a crash in the economy? Oh, I tell you what, I forgot. I forgot to talk about my turnips. With the market saturation. Yeah, logic would suggest that when you've sold all of your products, let's say we're a radio company, we'll call them MrAOtway radios. MrAOtway Radio Company sold all the radios to all the people who want to buy one in America. What's the next logical step? Sell it abroad. I'll go sell them in Europe or somewhere else. That's the most logical step. But the problem is, during the 1920s, America had put tariffs on foreign goods, which of course was a tax on imports. And other countries had responded by putting tariffs on American goods. So that meant when the companies had sold all they're going to sell in America, they found it very difficult to sell abroad because there were extra taxes on their goods. So people were more likely to not buy the American goods because they'd be more expensive than others. So yeah, the tariffs that worked for America through the 20s by decreasing the amount of competition, but when the market was saturated, tariffs worked against American companies because they couldn't sell abroad. There we go. So those are my reasons for the crash. Anybody want me to go over anything? Because this is the problem with this live stuff. I think it's great because it's easier for you to listen. In a classroom environment when there's 20, 30 of you and there's all sorts going off, it's hard to listen to the teacher, but when you just sat in front of your computer, you can. But the negative is, I can't check whether you've understood or not whilst I'm here right now. So if there's something that you've got, like say you've gone over that bit too quick, you must let me know. Because I'm trying to strike a fine balance between boring you and going on too much and not explaining things properly. So yeah, just give me fine sir or something like that and I'll go on to the next question. Anybody at all? There must be a delay between you typing and me seeing it come up on this screen. Just give me some sort of, yes, fine sir, move on to the next question. Got it, brilliant. Or, sir, just go over that bit again. Didn't quite get that. Don't quite understand. Have a drink. Or you could just stay completely silent, don't type anything. In which case, this is going to get really boring really fast. Ah, there's one. Right then. Thanks, Emily. So, next question which is linked to the crash, of course. Why did Roosevelt win the election in 1932? You know, I've taught this module, a module very similar to this, America 1919 to 41. And the question about why Roosevelt won the election in the other exam boards I've taught this in is quite a minor aspect. But when you look at all the past questions on the website, which hopefully you do and you're working through them, what you'll find is this is actually a really big thing with OCR. They really want to know about this election and why Roosevelt happened to win. Whereas what I would have probably focused on more at the other exam board was about how successful Roosevelt was, which is a big thing in this as well, but you know, this was always a minor part. For you it's not though, so we need to crack this, which is why I've chosen it. Right, I've got some statistics on this as well. So one reason why Roosevelt won is his electioneering, his campaign, if you like. I put his effective campaigning. We're in the middle of a general election now, people knocking on doors, people making speeches, it's always on the telly. They didn't have telly then, but he was always flying around the country, and we mean literally flying around the country, sometimes on train, travelling around, making sure he spoke to as many people, as many audiences as he possibly can. And there you can see the statistic. He went 20,000 kilometres on his grand tour of America campaigning for the election. That's one big reason, backed up by a statistic, of why he won. Linked to that, when he's talking to all of these people as he's travelling around the country, he's promising them a new deal. He's got a catchy slogan, and it absolutely resonates. There's a word for you. It resonates with the American people. It means they listen and go, yeah, we need a new deal. What's going on now? Not good enough. So we need a new deal. And he promised a new deal for the American people, and they heard him. And they thought, right, yeah, this is our guy. So it was catchy. He had an effective campaign with an effective slogan, and he went round making sure he could speak to as many people as possible. Now, I've just noticed down here, go over the saturation with the tariffs again. Don't apologise, Kieran. I thank you for saying it. So we've got why Roosevelt win 1932, grand tour, New Deal promise, catchy slogan, went round, saw loads of people, effective campaign. If I just go back to this. So, here we go. How can I describe it? I used this before, but they're just nearby. Cat treats. This is because the cat's room is here, the cat's bed. Let's say I own this cat treat company. And I've just started. That's a bad example actually, because people are going to continuously buy cat treats. Looking around for an example. Here we go. It's a fake GoPro, if you like. So it's not a GoPro, but it's very similar to one. So here is one of those things, a camera that you can attach to yourself, an action camera. And I've got one, as you can see here. Let's say I own this company for market saturation. Now, when I start this company, when I first create this product, or anybody, whether it's this company or any other company, creates one of these action cameras. They didn't exist about 10 years ago, or at least if they did, I didn't know about them. When they started selling them, originally, nobody had one, because they'd only just been created. So there was an unbelievably huge amount of people who could buy one of these, because they didn't have one, in England, let's say. Now, as they go through the years and sell them to people in England, there becomes a point where everybody who might want one of these has got one. That means the market is saturated. It's full up. People who've bought one, who want one, have bought one. So that means there's less people to sell to, because everybody's already got one. Who wants one? The only people who are going to buy another one of these are the people who want the latest model. You see? So if I own this company, and I'm in England, and I've sold all these to all those people that are going to buy them, I'm going to think, right, what am I going to do now? Because I've got all these workers, I've got my factory, they're pumping out all this. I don't want to start firing people. I know I'll expand and sell to France and Germany and Australia and America and all around the world. Now, that's all well and true if you can do that. But the problem for America in the 1920s is they'd put tariffs on foreign goods coming into America. And other countries had responded by putting tariffs on American goods. So I might have sold out in England, in Great Britain on my cameras, and then I go to sell them in France, and there's a great big tariff on them. The French people, I'm not buying your camera. That is far too expensive. Something like that. So I can't sell them in France. Can't sell them in Germany because there's tariffs on them, you see. So that's what I mean by market saturation and tariffs. That's how they work together. So hopefully we've got that, Kieran. You let me know. And I'll go back to why Roosevelt won the election. So here we go. Effective campaigning. We've done. Why else? Well, he believed in active government. When the Republicans, because Roosevelt was a Democrat, the Republicans believed in laissez-faire, which of course you should know is sort of leave alone, let things run themselves, let things sort themselves out, minimal government intervention. So people before the Great Depression in the 20s, they were all for this laissez-faire. They're like, yeah, brilliant, leave us to it, everything's going well. But when the Great Depression hits and people are like panicking, people actually starved in the Great Depression. And there was cases of malnutrition in New York, which is on your revision sheets, I'm sure. No worries, Kieran. That's what I'm here for. So yeah, people are actually So they were thinking, well, what's the government doing about this? So there becomes a point when you're panicking, when you're struggling, that you think we've elected them, they're supposed to be looking after us, what they're doing. So when Democrats and Roosevelt are saying, we're going to step in, we're going to do something, we're going to take some action, and the Republicans are saying, nah, just look, these things happen, they'll sort themselves out. We live in an economy that is capitalist, so you get booms, busts. It's always happened through history, so don't worry, it will sort itself out eventually. And you can imagine somebody struggling to make ends meet, living in a Hooverville, in a shantytown house, going, what do you mean it'll sort itself out? How long am I waiting for that then? That's not good enough. Sort it out. So when Roosevelt's coming along, promised to take action, people listen, they agree, they're like, brilliant, we want that. So there's another one. What else have I got here? Oh yes, personalities. And as an extra special treat, I've drawn you a little picture just to illustrate the point here. Hoover, there's no doubt about it, was an incredibly intelligent and successful man. He was successful before this, which sadly, if I was Hoover, I'd be looking back at this thinking, God, I worked all that time, all through my life, success after success, and all anybody remembers me for is being president when the Great Depression happened. And see, the thing is, he was an incredibly clever man, and he had a lot of success, and he'd gained a lot of respect, but the problem was, he was not the flamboyant character. Flamboyant's a good word, get that written down. He wasn't the flamboyant character that Roosevelt was. Roosevelt was the sort of person that you would describe, and people did describe, as the sort of person who could light up a room. He said to a famous Hollywood actor, can't remember which one, said, you know, you and I are the two greatest actors in this country. So, you know, he's got character, he's got personality, he can make people like him from the way he spoke. And now this links into fireside chats. Okay? Now, I should point out, make this very clear, fireside chats are not a reason why Roosevelt won the election, because he only did them when he became president. But a fireside chat is a good example of how his personality helped him to win the election in 1932. Charismatic, flamboyant, but also not patronising. He didn't speak down to the American people. He could speak to people on their level. So they felt that they identified with him. And the fireside chats, what he did, Kieran, and the rest of you, is he would sit maybe a bit like this, with radio, not YouTube, and speak to the American people on a fireside chat. It's called a fireside chat because everybody's living rooms would be organised around the fireplace, the heating, the source of heat. Now, we've got central heating that comes from all angles, and everything's arranged around the telly, usually. But it doesn't matter where the radio is, you can hear it wherever. So it would be arranged around the fireside, the family would gather round, they would listen on the radio to Roosevelt, who would explain things. He would say, like, lay it out quite straight, there's tough times ahead. We're in this together. It would make the American people feel like he was looking out for their best interests. He trusted them. He was straight with them. He didn't patronise them. But also, they listened to him because of his personality, being flamboyant, being charismatic, personable. There's another one you could have. So yeah, that's answered the question from before, I hope, about these fireside chats. There's a really... His most useful fireside chat came when he was sorting out the banking crisis, because the people had to suffer the banks being closed for a few days, and usually they'd be up in arms saying, "What do you mean you're shutting the banks? I can't get any money out. I can't pay my bills. This is ridiculous." But he'd gone on the radio and said, "Look, the banks, they're in trouble. People keep taking the money out of the banks. They don't trust the banks. So you got to trust me. I'm going to shut them. I'm going to have them inspected, and only the banks that I and the inspectors think are healthy will reopen. And then you need to pay me back from this. You have to trust me and put your money back in the banks." And people, they would have been up in arms if it had just happened, but he explained it to them. They went with it, they endured it, and afterwards, loads of people, there were millions and millions of dollars put back in the banking system as a result of that fireside chat. But back to the election, because remember, fireside chats happened after he was elected. But his personality happened all times. He was incredibly gifted as a politician in getting people to like him. And what else have we got? See, what else? Oh, right, yeah. Now, this is a really clear-cut example that you can use to say, why did Roosevelt win? Well, this is more, why did Hoover lose? Because the bonus army were a number of World War I veterans who wanted their bonus for fighting in the First World War early. You were due it after a few years. They weren't due it yet, but they were going to get it at some point. But these veterans, many of them were out of work. They were struggling to make ends meet. They might be living in Hoovervilles. They turned up in Washington to say, "Look, we fought for this country. We're war heroes. You owe us this money. I know that it's not now, but we want it now. And we are war heroes. We fought on behalf of this country. We did what the government asked of us. So this is our time of need. We were there in your time of need. This is our time of need. Sort us out." As you can imagine, lots of people supported this and said, look, we should be looking after our veterans. What did Hoover do? He said, "No, you're not having it." 5,000 of them refused to leave after he said that. And so he sent in the army. Now, the story goes, I get a few conflicting views about this from different textbooks. Some textbooks suggest that a couple of the veterans died and what was going on. The internet says different things. And one of the textbooks says that a baby died of tear gas poisoning as a result. 100 got injured. But the fact of the matter is, what could Hoover have done? Like, if he sat there as Hoover, what can I do to make myself as unpopular as possible? I could slap a baby. I could drown some kittens. Kick some dogs out of a window. No. I'll fight war heroes. It's the most stupid thing he could have done. It's going to make you unpopular. That war heroes the world over, through history, have gained some sort of respect. So to attack war heroes, to get them out of where you don't want them to be, was just the epitome of shooting yourself in the foot. His popularity was already not very high at that point, but it just completely plummeted, and really he didn't have much chance at all of ever winning after he had got the army to attack the bonus army. So there we go. Why did Roosevelt win? What have we got? Personalities. The bonus army. He believed in active government, and that's what people wanted during the Great Depression, whereas the Republicans believed in laissez-faire, which was really frustrating people. And he went on a big tour of America, 20,000 miles he travelled, with a fantastic election campaign slogan, maybe even the most famous in all of history, the New Deal. He promised the American people a New Deal, and that's what they wanted. They wanted a change from what had been going on through the 20s, so he was very effective at campaigning. And there we go. Look, if I look at the timer for my live stream, 29 minutes and 55 seconds. So we've gone through 2 questions there, and I've I've hit the 30-minute mark. If anybody wants me to answer any other specific questions, or again, go over anything over there, then that would be fantastic. Otherwise, I'm going to go do something else. You can go back to your English revision, which I suspect you'll all be doing. And tomorrow, I think you'll be there for the lesson. Maybe a touch late, depending on how things start. I won't be making you do too much high pressure stuff tomorrow, but there will be a little quiz on America, including the things that I've just gone through there. All knowledge quiz. So, if there's anything you want me to go through, you ask now, or I'm going. I'm going to fulfil a promise to my wife, because I spent all day yesterday in London at Wembley watching my football team lose. Not much fun. So she didn't see me. So what do I have to endure? Take me out. I watched Take Me Out with my wife. Say endure. I actually quite like it a bit. So, is that it? Anything? Well, just give us some indication that you're done. I'll eat chocolate whilst I'm waiting. I'd appreciate it. Got it like before, or thanks sir, sorted, brilliant, I'll go revise English now. Got no question, brilliant, thanks Kieran, smashing. So I'll do another live session next Sunday, all being well. I'll do another live session the Sunday after, and in the bit in between half term, if you keep an eye on the Rossett History Twitter account, I'll tweet when I happen to be free. If I'm twiddling my thumbs, I might go, you know what, I'll go on YouTube, do a bit of a live session for them. I don't know how busy I'll end up being, whether that will happen, but the only one I'll guarantee is that Sunday night, 2 weeks from now, before your first exam, I'll be sat here with the camera on, looking weird, because most of the time I'll just be quiet waiting for people to ask me a question. So there we go. Right, good luck with your English. I hope it all goes well tomorrow. I'll see you if you're in my lesson. And thanks for tuning in. See ya.